Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Meaningful Consumer Engagement webinar series on consumer advisory committees. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Later, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. Should you require assistance on today's call or later if you'd like to ask a question, you may press star then 0. As a reminder, I'd like to now turn this conference over to our host, Ms. Jessica Daniels. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Barbara, and welcome. My name is Jessica Daniels, and I work at the Lewin Group out of Falls Church, Virginia. Thank you for joining us today for the Meaningful Consumer Engagement webinar series and today's webinar on consumer advisory committees. This webinar is the first of 2 that are presented in conjunction with Community Catalyst and the Lewin Group and supported through the Medicare Medicaid Coordination Office, MMCO, in the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. Community Catalyst is a national nonprofit health advocacy organization that works with consumer advocates in over 40 states to bring the consumer voice to decisions affecting their health care. While the Lewin Group is a healthcare policy and research consulting organization that has worked extensively with governments, provider organizations, and subject matter experts to support Medicare, Medicaid-eligible beneficiaries, and other high-risk populations. Together with CMS, we support providers in their efforts to deliver more integrated, coordinated care to beneficiaries. MMCO is developing technical assistance and actionable item tools based on successful innovations and care models, such as this webinar series. To learn more about current efforts and resources, please visit resourcesforintegratedcare.com for more details. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that all microphones will be muted throughout the presentation. However, there will be a brief question and answer opportunity at the end of the presentation. If you do have a question, please use the question field to submit to our team. We will select a handful of questions to answer. All other Q&As will be posted to the Resources for Integrated Care website by Friday. Additionally, on the website, you can find the presentation and post-recording within the Consumer Engagement webinar pages. The presentation is currently available, and the post-recording will be available early next week. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will ask you to complete a quick survey of the webinar. Please take the time to complete this. We review all answers to make future webinars a greater success. Please contact rick@lewin.com, which is RIC@LEWIN.com, if you have any questions or additional comments. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our 3 speakers to you. William Dean, Delivery System and Consumer Engagement Manager at Community Catalyst. William builds collaborative working relationships with delivery systems serving people eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. As part of Community Catalyst's Voices for Better Health project, William assists health plans, health homes, and provider groups to develop approaches for more meaningful consumer engagement, from member meetings to consumer advisory councils to include consumers on governing boards among its dual-eligible beneficiaries. Previously, William was the consultant to the California State Senate Subcommittee on Aging and Long-Term Care, where he staffed legislation and conducted oversight and informational hearings on a variety of issues along the long-term care continuum. A former geriatric social worker with a focus on care management and hospice, William graduated from Boston College, Salem State University School of Social Work, and the University of Pacific McGeorge School of Law. Our second speaker is John Ruiz, Consumer Liaison at Commonwealth Care Alliance, CCA. John is responsible for creating opportunities to involve members of the One Care program in program development activities and equality initiatives, including the establishment of 5 regional consumer advisory committees. He identifies with the disability community as a person who has been living with HIV since 1983. Prior to joining CCA, he spent 18 years in the HIV field in various leadership roles, one of which included overseeing the work of the statewide Consumer Advisory Board for the Massachusetts Department of Public Health HIV/AIDS Bureau from 2000 to 2005. His work in human services over the past 3 decades has been focused on improving the health, quality of life, and empowerment of vulnerable and marginalized populations. Our third speaker, Ken Pariseau, External Affairs Manager at Neighborhood Health Plan of Rhode Island. Ken is responsible for developing and managing relationships with key community stakeholders, such as consumer advocates, service providers, and community organizations. Additionally, he oversees Neighborhood's member engagement strategy, including partnering with the health plan's member advocate, developing member advisory committees, and leading the member satisfaction work group. Ken's chief responsibility is to ensure that input from Neighborhood's community partners and members help drive the health plan's quality and process improvement activities. Prior to the 14 years of working at Neighborhood Health Plan, Ken worked at Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare for 16 years. He holds an MSW from Boston University School of Social Work and an MS in Healthcare Management from Lesley College School of Management. Now at this time, I would like to hand the webinar over to William Dean from Community Catalyst, who will introduce consumer engagement and advisory committees. William?
Thank you, Jessica, and welcome to everyone joining today for the first of 2 webinars about meaningful consumer engagement. First, let's walk through the agenda for today's discussion. I'm going to begin with how we at Community Catalyst define meaningful consumer engagement at the health plan or delivery system level. I'll discuss the benefits and why it really matters, and what tools and relationships can help delivery systems make their consumer engagement meaningful. Then I'm going to focus on the critical components of consumer engagement, and then more specifically of consumer advisory committees, which, as many of you know, are being required of plans under the 3-way contracts and memoranda of understanding we've seen to date. Next, I'll turn it over to our 2 experts, John Ruiz and Ken Pariseau, who will talk about consumer advisory committees happening at their respective health plans. They both have a tremendous amount of experience engaging consumers and their caregivers, as well as providers, advocates, and community partners, and will share some best practices and strategies for success. Finally, we'll ask a couple of poll questions to help us understand you a little bit better, and then welcome questions and offer any guidance we can to help you think about your consumer engagement work. Next slide. At Community Catalyst, we believe that meaningfully engaging consumers has many benefits and makes a real difference. When a health plan or a provider group, which during my slides I'll refer to as a delivery system, actively educates and listens to the stories of its members, including those family members and caregivers who play supportive and often critical roles in members' lives, it results in a more informed and empowered consumer, as well as a more effective and efficient delivery system. The benefits of eliciting consumer input on a regular basis are wide-ranging. Communications improve, connections with the community are enhanced, costly problems can be quickly corrected, and promising practices can be expanded. Together, these byproducts of consumer engagement can improve member satisfaction, streamline care delivery, and bend the cost curve. To help delivery systems, providers, advocates, and consumers work together to build meaningful consumer engagement in the communities they serve, Community Catalyst, through its Voices for Better Health project, which is funded with generous support from the Atlantic Philanthropies and the John A. Hartford Foundation, is developing a set of web-based interactive tools which you can find at communitycatalyst.org/meaningful-consumer-engagement. Series 1 of the toolkit was released at the end of February, and Series 2 should be available next month. The transformative nature of meaningful consumer engagement is well represented in the requirement of consumer advisory committees as seen in the MOUs and 3-way contracts approved thus far by CMS. Some common requirements include that they must be composed of members who represent the diversity of the entire enrollee population, including people living with 1 or more disabilities, that they in many cases must connect with and meaningfully involve stakeholders from the local community, including faith-based organizations, consumer advocates, and other community-based organizations, that they must meet regularly, usually at least quarterly, and finally that the delivery system must establish a mechanism for the governing board to listen to the advisory committee's input and advice. Today we'll walk through these essential components as well as additional ways to ensure that advisory committees are as productive and successful as possible. Next slide, please. Consumer engagement can occur at many levels along the ladder of engagement. Moving up, or in the case of this slide, to the right, along the ladder, consumers can be engaged at higher and higher levels, offering them the chance to take a deeper dive into some of the more complex issues that affect their health and overall well-being, which of course we know is affected by the delivery system that's caring for them. From newsletters and surveys, to focus groups and town hall-style member meetings, to even higher levels of engagement like in electing consumers to the board of directors or an advisory committee, which is our focus today, delivery systems should use a combination of strategies from each rung on the ladder of engagement in order to give consumers of varying capacities and interest levels multiple opportunities and settings in which to engage. Our online toolkit walks you through many of the strategies seen here. In our next webinar on Wednesday, June 11th, we'll cover exactly how to organize and run culturally competent member meetings in the communities where members live. Next slide, please. Some components of consumer engagement are really critical to the meaningful dialogue that delivery systems desire to have with their members. First, recruitment efforts will vary according to which strategy along the ladder of engagement is being used. For example, a mail-in survey may be sent broadly to all enrollees or their proxies, while a more targeted approach is needed to recruit members of an advisory committee, since their advocacy and communication skills and the diversity they bring to the table will enrich the committee's work. Successful consumer engagement means hearing from diverse voices, because each consumer, each family caregiver, each member of a given community that is impacted by the delivery system brings a different set of personal preferences, challenges, and experiences to the conversation. As such, it's essential that the delivery system do everything it can to engage a diverse mix of consumers. To achieve diversity, it's important to offer incentives to encourage participation. Some options may include financial stipends, meals or refreshments, small giveaways, companionship, socialization, contests, or special recognition in a newsletter or on your website. It's also essential to remove barriers like transportation for those who need it. You may also need to provide respite care for caregivers to participate in certain types of engagement. And finally, it's incredibly useful to partner with providers, consumer advocates, and community-based organizations to identify prospective participants, since they often know and are most familiar with the consumers who possess the greatest capacity and desire to get involved. For those consumers who may be unfamiliar with some of the topics of engagement or who would benefit from communications in alternative formats, ongoing training and support will greatly enrich the feedback received by the delivery system. Another part of this is accessibility, which I'll talk about in the next slide. Finally, to ensure that consumer engagement is truly a collaborative process, it is imperative to create a feedback loop in which any delivery system improvements are shared with the consumers whose input led to those improvements. Consumers who feel heard and who feel their contributions matter will continue to invest their time and talents to providing feedback. Next slide, please. Before we hear from the real experts on this important work, I want to talk a little more specifically about how to structure and compose consumer advisory committees and apply these critical components of consumer engagement. One of the many sections of the Consumer Advisory Committee tool that we've developed involves structure and composition options. Structure has to do with who will lead or facilitate the advisory committee meetings. Will they be consumer-led? Will an advocate or someone from a community-based organization facilitate? Or will the delivery system serve this function? Composition involves who will be the actual members of the committee, with voting rights, for example. Advisory committees could be composed of consumers only, or a mix of consumers, advocates, providers, and or delivery system staff, but preferably at least half of any mixed committee should be actual members or their proxies. In the interest of time, please refer to our Consumer Advisory Committee tool on our website for the pros and cons of each structure and composition type. Since advisory committees require of its members both a greater time commitment and a greater capacity to analyze complex issues, consumers should be recruited with that in mind. These and other requirements will automatically narrow the field of prospective members, making it doubly important to create incentives eliminate barriers, and leverage your community partners to achieve diversity on the committee. It is also critical to train and retain your consumer members, since many members will be unfamiliar with certain issues or may otherwise feel burdened by their participation. Caregivers, advocates, and other community partners can offer support before, during, and after meetings and provide leadership development training to members interested in deepening these skills. This will be the focus of a tool that we're developing now and will release soon. Also important to retention, and to recruitment too for that matter, is making meetings accessible to members who live with certain disabilities or who have limited English proficiency. Advisory committee meetings should take place in an ADA-compliant facility, and material should be available in each member's preferred language or format. Interpreters and/or assistive technology, like a language translation device or communication access real-time translation for members who are deaf or hard of hearing, should also be made available. All accommodations should be communicated to prospective members during recruitment efforts and followed through upon in earnest when setting up and running each meeting. Finally, not only does creating a feedback loop fulfill the requirement on delivery systems to establish a process for providing consumer input to the governing board, but it also shows consumers that their input has made a real difference. Such a process could include providing the board a debriefing report of the committee's recommendations, having one or more board members attend each advisory committee meeting, or inviting an advisory committee member to address the board on a particular issue. Now I'd like to turn it over to John to tell us about the Consumer Advisory Committees at Commonwealth Care Alliance.
Thank you, Bill, and hello, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about our Consumer Advisory Committees. Let me first start by sharing who we are as an organization. Commonwealth Care Alliance is a nonprofit care delivery organization that specializes in caring for people with complex disabilities. The organization was founded in 2004 to administer the first duals demonstration in the country for individuals aged 65 and over. This program is known as the Senior Care Options Program. Our experience and success with that demonstration positioned us to become an ICO for the under 65 population. And that program was implemented in October of 2013, and so far we have over 7,000 enrollees. CCA is highly committed to consumer engagement. Consumers have been involved in designing CCA from the very beginning. Our three founding partners are organizations that carry consumer interests as their primary frame in assessing healthcare delivery and policy. Two of these organizations remain our corporate partners, and they write our bylaws and choose our board of directors. This ensures that CCA's commitment to consumer involvement will never falter. Our Senior Care Options program has benefited tremendously from consumer engagement, and we believe that our current 4.5 star rating from CMS is in part the result of consumer engagement. We engage consumers not because it's required, but because we believe at our core that consumers are experts in their own lives and that our expertise is incomplete without their expertise. Next slide, please. So we planned 5 regional consumer advisory groups. There are currently 4 that were established in May, and we are working on a 5th one. The 5 regions represented by these groups are the Greater Boston area, Western Mass, Central, Northeastern, and Southeastern Massachusetts. Each group will have 12 members, and so far we have recruited about half. And this is an important point. You don't have to wait until all the seats are filled to establish your groups and get them going. We will continue our recruitment efforts to fill the empty seats, and we will target communities not yet represented in our current membership. The meetings are held in the community. Right now they're bi-monthly. Eventually we may move to quarterly meetings. We decided early on to have advisory committees based in the communities where our members live. This is really important to us because we share the belief that people with disabilities are part of the fabric of the community. So we felt it was most appropriate to have community-based advisory meetings. The visibility of the groups in each community is also very important to us. The meetings are held in centralized venues that are ADA compliant. are accessible via public transportation, and have parking availability. Due to the confidentiality considerations, the groups are closed to the general public, except for personal care attendants or their caregivers who must be there to assist members with mobility or cognitive disabilities. That said, each group will host an open community forum once or twice a year to give the larger community of consumers, advocates, and providers and interested others an opportunity to participate in the process. In a sense, we are doing community building work. Advisory committee members receive a stipend in transportation or transportation reimbursement. Next slide, please. The groups are very diverse right now, even though they are not fully occupied in terms of race, ethnicity, age, gender, and the breadth of disability experience. Also, some of the people in the groups identify as members of the LGBT community. I currently facilitate the meetings, but plan to train members with leadership potential to facilitate and take meeting minutes. This often leads to greater ownership of the meeting, which helps with retention of members over the long term. Regarding recruitment, so far we've employed a handful of recruitment strategies that have been very effective. The first one was a mailing to a sample of our One Care membership as of January 1st. We sent out about 1,000 applications and cover letters inviting people to join. We also solicited referrals from our care management organizations, our clinical groups, and our health homes, and we solicited referrals from contracted provider agencies such as the Centers for Independent Living. We received over 80 applications through these approaches and interviewed 53 applicants. The interviews were an opportunity to hear about people's motivation for wanting to get involved, their willingness to commit to a 2-year term, and how they would share information from the advisory committees with the communities they represent. It was also an opportunity for them to find out what being involved entails and answer any questions they might have. Orientation and training, I can't say enough about this. It is incredibly important. Committee members need accurate knowledge about the demonstration and appropriate context about the program and the organization they will be advising. So we delivered training to each of the groups. The training had 3 modules. One was an orientation on CCA, who we are as an organization, our mission and core values, our care philosophy, and such. We also did a One Care 101 module on the goals of the demonstration, the services covered, and the central features of the program, like person-centered care, care coordination, care planning, interdisciplinary teams, and so forth. And 3, we provided an orientation on advisory committee operating principles, what some people might call bylaws, but they're not as formal as bylaws. We also included a glossary of terms and a handout on person-first language, the timeline of the disability rights movement, and a few profiles of national leaders of the disability rights movement. We felt it was really important for members to understand the connection between the movement and the One Care program, which embodies the type of care the movement has been fighting for many decades, namely the right to have control over your own life, the dignity to make your own choices, and the freedom to live independently in the community. Knowing that they are part of something bigger, that they are making history, and how the work they do will help influence the future of care for all people with disabilities across the country gives them a purpose to be and remain involved. I believe there's an advocate in every person living with disability, and the advisory committees allow them to channel the advocate within. And speaking of staying involved, retention in the groups can be very challenging and requires ongoing effort. How do you keep people interested and engaged over time? Here are 10 retention strategies that we are currently employing. 1, the orientation and training I just talked about. People are more likely to stay if they understand the mission and if their involvement is meaningful. 2, providing a group structure in a meeting process. Having structure helps members understand how the meetings operate and what is expected of them. 3, we conduct group building activities at the start of each meeting. This promotes bonding and trust among the members and fosters a peer environment that members look forward to being in. 4, we show respect for their time, input, and advice in the form of a stipend for each meeting attended. 5, we ensure they have transportation to and from the meeting. 6, we provide accommodations such as ASL interpretation, meeting rooms large enough to comfortably fit wheelchairs, materials and large fonts for people with visual impairments, and any other accommodation needed for people to fully participate. 7, we follow up with members who miss a meeting to brief them and offer an opportunity to provide one-on-one feedback over the phone. 8, we remind members of upcoming meetings, and we mail the agenda at least 2 weeks in advance. 9, we provide food and beverages during the meetings. And 10, last but certainly not least, we have a feedback loop whereby members are informed how CCA will use their feedback to make program improvements wherever feasible. This is an important point. Consumer advisory groups often fall apart because their feedback doesn't get a response from the organization and they feel tokenized. And lastly, speaking of feedback loops, in order to ensure there's an established feedback loop to CCA's organizational leadership and governance, a standing committee was formed at CCA to both plan the meeting agenda and discuss and analyze consumer feedback after the meetings. The committee is composed of executive staff like the Senior VP for Medical Affairs, the Senior VP for the One Care Program, the VP for Clinical Operations, the Senior Director of Evaluation, and myself and others. It is extremely important for my role, or for anyone in the role of consumer liaison, to have direct access to executive leadership who has the authority to respond to consumer input and advice. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation. I will now pass it over to Ken.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to describe some of the activities that Neighborhood Health Plan utilizes to engage members, their families, and providers, and to get their voice into our health plan in order to drive quality and process improvement activities. Rhode Island is moving to full integration of the dually eligible in 2 phases. All the dually eligible beneficiaries will be enrolled in one of 2 managed care options. In Phase 1, only Medicaid-covered services will be managed. These are primarily the long-term services and supports. In Phase 2, if the MOU is approved next spring, the Medicare services will also be integrated into the managed care delivery system. The program is an opt-out program. In both phases, consumers will be able to opt out of managed care and back into fee-for-service. There are approximately 28,000 duals in our state. Rhody Health Options is Neighborhood's product for the dually eligible. In Phase 1, Neighborhood Health Plan is responsible for the management of the full continuum of long-term care services, both facilities and home community-based services. Enrollment in Rhody Health Options began on October 1st, 2013, and we currently have over 17,000 enrollees. Neighborhood Health Plan has a long-standing commitment to member engagement in our health plans improvement activities. Currently, we have member advisory committees for 4 of our product lines, including the new Rhody Health Options. Our first member advisory committee was started in 2002. The different member advisory committees can be comprised of members, their families, advocates, providers, community partners, and senior managers from Neighborhood. Neighborhood sees the member advisory committees as being a critical way of getting the voice of the member into the health plan. Our member satisfaction work group is comprised of all departments that touch members. This includes medical management, member services, the member advocate, behavioral health, provider services, and it also includes 4 or 5 members. The goal of the member satisfaction work group is to utilize information and data from members and other organizational sources to drive quality improvement activities in the organization. Neighborhood employs a full-time member advocate. The member advocate is primarily a problem solver for members and their families. The member advocate assists members and their families in overcoming the barriers they may encounter in our health plan and in supporting them in better navigating the healthcare delivery system. There's also some administrative support available to support both the member advisory committees and the member satisfaction work group. As manager of external affairs, I support the member advocate in the facilitation of the member advisory committees, and I facilitate the member satisfaction work group. Next slide, please. Meetings are held bi-monthly at neighborhood at times that are convenient for the members. Our Rhody Health Options Member Advisory Committee runs from 12 to 1:30 in the afternoon. The other member advisory committees are held in the evening, as that is more convenient for the participants. Neighborhood provides a stipend and a meal at the advisory committee meetings. Transportation can be arranged if necessary. For our other advisory committees, we also provide a stipend to assist in child care expenses. Our member advisory committees are facilitated by our member advocate. Our current Rhody Health Options Advisory Committee at this time is comprised primarily of adults with disabilities. We are currently working with the Senior Agenda Coalition and the Rhode Island Organizing Project to identify older adults who would also be interested in participating. The Senior Agenda Coalition is a group of organizations concerned about the issues of older adults. The Rhode Island Organizing Project does grassroots organizing regarding issues of older Americans. Meetings are held at the same time and on the same day every month. Advisory committee members are contacted a week before the meeting as a reminder and also to determine if they may have transportation needs. We have an agenda for each meeting. Next slide, please. In Rhody Health Options, we are also attempting to develop more community-based advisory meetings, such as with frontline providers, such as nurses and social workers in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and home care agencies, at senior centers and senior housing facilities, resident and family council meetings where they exist, and at the membership meetings of the different long-term care provider associations. With this population, in order to get helpful information regarding their needs and concerns, we will need to think of new ways of engaging both members and those who care for them. Neighborhood needs to ensure that we explore the full range of opportunities to get the voice of the member and those who care for them into the health plan so we can plan improvement activities. Recruitment for our advisory committees occur in a number of different ways, such as through contacts that our member advocate may have with members, referrals from advocates or other community partners, referrals from our nurse care managers, community events, word of mouth. Next slide, please. We do not provide any formal training for those participating in our advisory committee. We do discuss the goals of the advisory committee to hear from our members or their caregivers, those issues, concerns, and questions they may have about the health plan, what is not working for them, and what are some of their suggestions for improvement. With our other advisory committees, several members have testified at legislative hearings, spoken at press conferences, and other community events. Our Rhody Health Options members may have similar opportunities. For those members who are involved in these public activities, we have assisted with practice sessions, content information as needed, and assistance from our communications department when requested. For questions regarding the health plan or benefits, we will bring to the advisory committee the appropriate senior manager in that area of question or concern, such as medical management, behavioral health, pharmacy. For example, at our most recent Rhody Health Options Advisory Committee meeting, there were many questions and issues regarding prescriptions and medications. To respond to this need, our plan is to have our Director of Pharmacy attend our next meeting to respond to our members' questions. I believe the major retention force, aside from the members' fondness for our member advocate and me, is the opportunity they experience to have their voice heard and to see some positive change as a result of the issues they identify at the advisory committee meeting. Issues raised at the member advisory committee meetings are often heard by senior managers who are present at the meeting, who can then provide either information or support in resolving the issue. Issues are also passed along to the issue's business owner for their response if it's an informational issue or for their involvement in developing a plan of action to respond to the issue. The issue then becomes an agenda item as a member satisfaction work group whose charge is to develop action steps to drive the improvement in the health plan. And issue follow-ups are on the agenda for every member advisory committee meeting. Thank you. Now back to Jessica.
Thank you, William, John, and Ken, for sharing your knowledge and experiences on consumer engagement and the advisory committees at your locations. Now, I invite for all participants to think about your current environment and situation on consumer engagement and to answer two polls that we have to get an environmental scan of what currently is ongoing at your location or within your environment. The first question is, which of these consumer engagement strategies are being used in at least one healthcare delivery system in your community? And please select all that apply. The first being, do you have surveys and comment cards, focus groups, or member meetings? What about existing consumer advisory committees or consumers currently on existing governing boards? And if you don't have any or you're unsure, please select unknown. I'll give you a couple of moments to think about this. Wonderful. You know, and looking at the results, Bill, do you have any comments about what you see with these responses?
I am very surprised and pleasantly so that there's a fair amount of consumer advisory committees being experienced in delivery systems in the communities of our participants. It's quite a high number at 29.2%. Also a high number of comment cards, surprisingly low actually number of focus groups. I'm kind of surprised about that, and would love to know in the questions some of the reasons why we have the unknown. If either our options didn't cover everything, or if people just have some questions that they could ask of us, we can try to help to figure out some other strategies as well that might be helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Now, our second question is regarding advisory committee resources. And the question states, what other tools are needed as you work to develop active, effective consumer advisory committees? Select the one that applies. Do you need outreach, recruitment, or retention strategies? Maybe stronger relationships with community partners? What about training for delivery system staff or buy-in? Or do you need training for consumers? Or do you find that you need additional financial resources? And if you're unsure, again, please just select unknown. I'll give you a few moments to think about your current needs in developing an effective consumer advisory committee. Wow, that was a very fast response from everyone. Thank you for your input. Bill, would you like to make any comments about these ones?
Well, pretty high results on the outreach efforts that they need to improve upon, and need some strategies for those, as well as on training consumers. I think that that's pretty much in line with what we're thinking here at Community Catalyst as well. We think that obviously we're not going to have folks at the Consumer Advisory Committee table if we don't do really good outreach, recruitment efforts, as well as figure out ways to be excellent at retaining folks, making sure that they're supported ongoingly. And then, of course, part of that has to do with training, of course. Folks to be regular active participants on consumer advisory committees need to really know what's going on. They need to have things described to them and summarized for them in ways that they can really actively participate in the delivery system and in improving upon it. So those are certainly areas that we've found are needed, and that's why we wrote an entire tool on our website on recruitment strategies, and that's why we're actually in the process of finalizing a tool on training consumers, because we have identified those as pretty high need tools for these committees to be successful and effective. On the lower side, but not too low, obviously the stronger relationships with community partners and training. Those are matched up evenly at 24.7%. So, almost a quarter of our participants are seeing that they could develop stronger relationships with community partners, and that they could even develop maybe some stronger buy-in and training for delivery system staff, because this might be a new strategy for a health plan or a health home. Maybe it does not have a lot of experience doing some really meaningful consumer engagement with their members, and so not everyone in the organization might know how to do that or why to do that. And so it looks like there's some definite interest in those relationships, as well as in the training of staff. And then there with a third of folks feeling that, this does cost money. It's going to cost to put together some good meetings and to develop the materials and the training mechanisms for folks to really be involved well and to be retained, and to have these meetings in the community, which we found that a lot of our speakers talked about having meetings in the communities in which people live. And so, of course, financial resources are needed to sustain those.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the input and participation that we had from all of our participants. Well, in the remaining amount of time that we have left, let's turn our attention to a few questions that we've received. And as a reminder, if you have a question, there are a few ways that you can submit them. You can utilize the chat feature, or you can use our AT&T operator. Operator, at this time, would you remind our participants how to ask a question over the phone line?
Yes, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question, you may press star, then 0 on your touch-tone phone. You'll hear an acknowledgement tone. An operator will then take your name and further instruct you. If you're using a speakerphone, pick up the handset before pressing the numbers. Once again, if you have a question, you may press star 0.
Thank you, operator. Okay, our first question that we're going to answer has come in about the funding for stipends. And I'm going to have Ken, if you could, answer this question. The question is, what funding is used for stipends, paid child care, or meals at the meetings?
The funding for those activities comes out of the admin part of our capitation rate from the state. We're paid both. For those folks familiar with managed care, there's an admin part of the PMPM and a medical expense part of the PMPM. And we see these advisory committee meetings as being so important that we devote some of our fairly tight admin resources to fund these activities.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Our next question that has come in, which I'm going to have John answer, is, do any of your community advisory committees include requirements for random participant selection? And if so, how do you meet the requirement?
Thank you for your question. There isn't a requirement for random selection, but we did do a random selection because we felt it was the most appropriate way to select potential members. And so we went through our caseload, and we picked one from every 5 members. So it was, pretty straightforward, and we did the mailing and sent it to those folks, to about 1,000 people.
Right. Thank you so much. Our next question that has come in is going to be for William. And besides the Consumer Engagement Toolkit, how else is Community Catalyst working to help dual demonstration plans with their consumer engagement?
Well, it's a great question. We do provide technical assistance services to plans, and so, of course, there's the interactive web-based tool kit on our website, but we also can provide more strategic consulting and technical assistance on identifying the community partners and organizations that you can partner with to expand your outreach efforts and your recruitment efforts, as well as your training and support efforts. And when you get consumer members onto your advisory committees, a lot of times your community partners can be really play significant roles in keeping folks informed and motivated and in helping them develop leadership skills. So we do provide a lot of technical assistance around that, can really kind of pinpoint, identify for delivery systems in their particular communities who is available to help them structure these advisory committees and put them together, and then help them to run, as effectively and successfully as possible, because it does take a village really to get, a lot of these to be developed and to be ongoing. And so if we can do anything to help, delivery systems identify those community partners that can really help them, we think that would be a good solution. And so if there are any other questions, I don't think we put this in the slides, but folks are welcome to email me directly at wdean, D-E-A-N, at communitycatalyst.org. And, of course, if you email Rick or RIC at lewin.com, they can forward me emails as well. But we're happy to answer any questions about the particular services that we can provide delivery systems on how to actually apply the toolkit to their unique situation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next question that was asked, I'm actually going to ask for 2 people to answer. The question is, please explain how resources were allocated to initiate the Consumer Advisory Committee meetings. With understaffed departments, many of the work, which is the recruitment, follow-up, administration, and logistics, fall onto one person. So I'm going to ask for Bill to answer this on what's recommended, and then I'm going to ask Ken to answer this on what is the actual sort of reality having executed this.
Would you mind repeating that question?
Sure thing. Explain how resources are allocated to initiate the Consumer Advisory Committee meetings, particularly when you are with understaffed departments, because a lot of the work will fall onto one person's shoulders to do the recruitment or the follow-up or any of the administration and logistics.
Yeah, that is a really difficult question to answer because, our belief here at Community Catalyst and the experience that we have in interviewing, multitude of delivery systems that are implementing, consumer engagement or advisory committees in some, one shape or another, is that they really generally have dedicated staff members to that particular work. And so when you're starting out an advisory committee and you don't have a dedicated staff, because of so much of the questions that folks have when they're onboarding onto advisory committees and so much of the support and accessibility or accommodations that folks need to to start their participation, if you don't do it right, you very well might lose them. And so it's kind of it's just I feel like I'm in a pickle here because it is a difficult question to answer in terms of what we'd recommend. Obviously, do the absolute best you can to make sure that folks feel, quite listened to, quite included, that, try to juggle as much of, of the work that you can. But in general, if you can try to identify folks, if for a short period within the organization, or you could obviously we hope that you'd leverage some of the community partners or consumer advocates in your community, which again, I said that we could help you identify those, because like you said, when the delivery system does not have the resources internally or the capacity internally to do the work, it does become quite difficult to do it well. And so we would recommend dedicated staff, and if not, to leverage your community partners, and we can help people think through that a little bit more.
Great. I think that's a great answer. We have a flurry of questions. Let's go ahead and answer just maybe one or two more from what's coming in through online, and then we'll ask the operator if there's any questions coming in through the telephone line. This question is going to be directed for John, and the question is, how do you view training? Is it something that's only done at the beginning of someone's involvement, or do you feel that it should happen throughout the time that the person is involved?
That's a really good question. I think initially, so what we did was we gathered the people who were seated, who were appointed as members, and we did an initial training with them. But future members will be trained. Depends on the situation. If I have 10 or 15 members, we'll do a one-on-one training for everyone. Or I may have to do some one-on-one orientation and training with new members. It depends on how many we have available to train at a given time. Training materials most of the training materials on OneCare and CCA were already developed from other presentations that we did. And I developed the operating principles orientation. So it's going to be a lot of work. Every time you recruit you have to provide orientation and training, and it's just part of doing this kind of business, and I am happy to do it. And then down the road, we continue to do training. We continue to inform people about different program elements, particularly when we go in to get feedback on a particular topic. We'll do a presentation first on what that topic is about, and then we go into a feedback session. So training is definitely ongoing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John.
You're welcome.
Our next question is going to be directed towards Ken, and it's a follow-up question regarding the stipend and the funding. There's been a lot of questions coming in about how much the stipend is for members. Can you provide maybe a little bit more detail about the stipend, and maybe what the stipend is for attendance or for child care, or does it depend on the group the person is involved in?
The stipend at this point that we provide is $60 per group, and as I mentioned, the groups generally run for an hour and a half. Our child care stipend in those groups where that's appropriate is currently $15, and in the fall we are planning to increase that to $25. Many of our parents with children have a difficult time in affording childcare, so there have been a couple of member advisory groups where they brought their kids, and although it's nice to see kids, it can make the group pretty disruptive. So we are going to increase the child care stipend in the fall, but the participation stipend is $60 per group.
Great. Thank you so much. We're going to go back to John with a question about utilizing consumer advisory groups. Do you utilize consumer advisory groups to help gather information on consumer preferences related to accessing services as part of your advisory committee?
Absolutely. That's definitely part of the role of the groups. The first meeting in May, we asked them about their early experiences with the One Care program. So what have your experiences been so far? Are you getting the services that you need, and so forth? And so we are going to go in and ask different questions at every meeting. And this one happened to be on early care experiences. The next one might be on a different topic, like care coordination, care management, the care plan, unmet needs like dental coverage and so forth. And so every time we are going to be asking not only about people's experiences, but where is the unmet need? What kinds of accessibility problems are you having in getting certain services? I'm encouraging people to use our systems if they're not in agreement with the decision made by our clinical groups. They certainly have a right to appeal. If they don't feel they've been treated appropriately, they have a right to a grievance. And, because it's important that we also test those systems. So really, the point I'm trying to stress across the groups is that we're looking at systems-wide problems that we can fix based on the feedback from all of the 5 groups. The personal problems, I'm encouraging them, and again, this is part of empowering them to be assertive, encouraging them to follow through with our member services department. And if that doesn't work, then at that point I will get involved with individual complaints. But it's really important to help people understand what their options are and what they can do about any complaints they have about our services.
Hey, wonderful. Thank you so much. Operator, at this time, do we have any questions that have come through the telephone line?
Yes, we have one question from the line of Kiana Azari. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Kiara? Or
yes,
Kiana?
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I'm actually here with Tamara. And the first question is, have you used the advisory groups to tailor your Medicare benefit package? And if so, what did they come up with? Are there any outlying needs that they came up with as a group?
Ken, are you in a position to answer that?
Actually, Medicare is not a part of our product line at this point. So I suspect there will be more discussion about that in the fall in anticipation of the Medicare piece coming in plan in the spring. So that has not been a focus of our work yet at this point.
Okay. My second question, can you hear me? My second question is, if you were able to give a $60 stipend per meeting, there is a regulation with the IRS that you'd have to mandatorily report anything over $600 given to members. So we were trying to find out how that was able to happen. Are the members Medicare, Medicaid, or how are you able to work that through?
The members in our committees sign or fill out a 1099 form, so they're essentially dependent contractors for us, and we generally have 5 or 6 meetings a year, so at $60 a pop, I mean, you're looking at somewhere around $300 per year per member.
Great. Thank you, Ken, very much.
Thank you.
Operator, do we have any other questions that have come through the line?
There are no further questions at this time.
Okay, wonderful. Well, at this time, I'd really like to go ahead and thank our speakers and thank everyone for their time and participation. The next slide that you'll see in just a moment is our survey that we have. Please take about 30 seconds to go ahead and complete the survey. This is regarding the webinar, so we can continue to provide quality webinars in the future for you all. And as a reminder, if you have any questions,